the Ukrainian army has made a significant move. The Russian troops was taken aback by what happened. The bridge, Russia's primary supply line, was submerged. The essential structure of this bridge has terrified the Russians in the Ukrainian territory. Russians revolted after being deprived of food and munitions. What Putin gave in return enraged the Russian troops. The Ukrainian army began to develop a large dominance in the final days of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Because of this condition, the Russian army was able to take a radically different approach in that region. As a result, a massive ammunition supply line for the Russian army to send to conflict zones has been destroyed. Because the Ukrainian army has cut off the Russian army's ammunition network, the Russian army is in a very difficult situation. As a result, Russian soldiers revolted and assaulted the military headquarters. The Russian army has now encountered a new challenge. It caused a huge blow to the Russian army as a result of highly hard work by the Ukrainian army's intelligence. Many opportunities for Russia were squandered. Many of the Russians and soldiers were startled at what to do as a result of this vital information. While the Ukrainian army continues to exert pressure in this region, the Russian army's worst deficiency has been identified for a long time. Ukrainian intelligence has been plotting an invasion of Soledar. Recognizing that this maneuver would only be effective if the Russian army's ammunition network was cut off, the Ukrainian soldiers devised a strategy. The important role in this strategy would also be possible with the flag guards, whom the Ukrainian army frequently employs. The Ukrainian army originally plotted the region's path, but that was insufficient. Ukrainian operatives in the Russian army learned that Russia had dispatched a substantial quantity of ammunition to Soledar. When the Ukrainian army heard this, they moved to blow up the route utilized directly, not the munitions truck. This would also halt short-term attacks on the Ukrainian army, effectively breaking the resistance in Soledar. As a result, the Ukrainian army has moved to strike this bridge. The flags were raised and the Russian convoy's location was identified. Ukrainian army infantry have been positioned at the bridge where the Russian convoy will cross. These infantrymen were poised to deliver the decisive blow to the convoy. Ukrainian infantry engaged in combat as the Russian convoy approached the bridge, but it was the Ukrainian flag officers from the air who would deliver the decisive blow. Ukrainian forces detonated a bomb in front of the Russian convoy. This incident has completely paralyzed the convoy. Following this incident, Russian soldiers jumped out of their cars and began fighting. However, because they were on the bridge, they were at a significant disadvantage. Ukrainian flag officers began firing shells at this location. The operation proved more easier for the Ukrainian army after that because the Russian convoy was on the bridge. Many men escaped, taking the remaining ammo trucks. The Ukrainian army advanced towards its own ranks, planting fours beneath the bridge and blowing it up. This news enraged the soldiers in Soledar who were waiting for ammo and supplies. These men sprang to their feet and marched to meet with the Russian leader. Everyone at the Soledar headquarters got into each other. Many soldiers at the military headquarters in Soledar were disturbed by the commander's demeanor. As a result, they began to revolt. Instead of calming the soldiers here, the commander gave the order to hit the other soldiers. However, the other soldiers were unable to shoot their friends. The Russian commander wasn't sure what to do after this episode. A tank carrying rebel forces moved away from this area. They ran over the commander's leg who had yelled stop. While the distress created by the scenario shook the authorities and soldier, the migration of many soldiers towards this region continued. However, the Ukrainian army's intelligence was still active since the bridge has also been demolished. The Ukrainian army has proceeded to launch a massive operation in the direction of Soledar. Ukrainian army have made one of the most rapid advances into this region. Knowing that the Russian force was surrounded, the Ukrainian army moved towards this location. Following this orientation, many changes occurred since the last rebellion. The Russian military headquarters had been relatively peaceful. Knowing of this possibility, the Ukrainian army immediately dispatched Ukrainian special forces to the region. Recognizing that the Russian army lacked an air defense system protecting this region, the Ukrainians took action and blockaded the Russian military headquarters in order to take it. Many Bayraktars also went out for this region in order to consolidate Ukraine's supremacy in this region. When the rebel soldiers fled, there were relatively few soldiers remained at the Russian military headquarters. As a result, this obstruction was extremely important. That is why the Ukrainian army has explicitly requested surrender. Russian soldiers who did not respond to the call to arms began to fire. The Russians, who were few in number, were severely diminished as a result of the mutual battle. With the arrival of the flag officers, the Russian army had no further maneuvers to make due to the limitations of this maneuver. The Russian army was unable to confront Ukraine. And the fact that Russian soldiers did not want to lose such an important headquarters exacerbated the situation, however, because Ukraine insisted on it. The Russian soldiers were forced to surrender after this victory. Ukraine was clearly ahead of Russia with this forward movement. The Russian army has no room to take even the smallest step. As a result, Russia has begun an extremely difficult journey. Russia had begun to endure an economic catastrophe as a result of recent bad judgments and policies. The main cause of this economic disaster was the war, which was severely protracted. While Ukrainian forces guaranteed that the battle was prolonged in this manner, it cleared the way for the Russian army to encounter significant difficulties. While it is unclear what Russia would do in the face of these difficulties, Putin predicted at the start of the war that he would enter Kiev within a week. However, these thoughts were severely disrupted. For more than a year, he has been unable to defeat the Ukrainian army. Ukraine has entered a dangerous moment as a result of these successive setbacks. Even if Ukraine wins a minor victory over Russia, there will be little time to demolish Putin's regime. The Russian forces were well aware of the situation. Everyone in Russia has begun to believe that Putin's power must be limited. Putin, having become aware of this notion, began to adopt a totally different agenda. In 2016, a Putin-linked group was founded in Russia to detect and punish regime opponents. With the foundation of this organization, even the smallest dissident movement in Russia began to be severely punished. While this event turned the markets upside down, it also caused the economy to suffer greatly. People in Russia have begun to go without even the most basic necessities. While this crisis has caused significant damage to Russia's internal market, Russians have begun to anticipate widespread victimization. People in Russia are undergoing a severe economic crisis as a result of numerous issues. This scenario has also begun to demolish Russia's last trump cards. Russia, according to military specialists, has numerous issues. As a result of these problems, the Russian people began to face more challenges. Russians began to emigrate abroad. Even in 2022, around 5.4 million people in Russia acquired passports. As a result, there are no people remaining in Russia. One of the issues that Russia has faced in terms of mobilization is that there are no people left to fight in the country. If this continues, Russia will be unable to win the war. If the war continues in this manner, Putin's influence will be severely weakened. It remains to be seen what Putin, who is aware of this, will do next. Ukraine has made a significant move with this. The armed formations in Solda and Bakhmut will now be able to leave Ukraine. Following that, the Ukrainian army cleared a previously obscure subject. Things have shifted in Ukraine's favor as Russian troops have been unable to find refuge in this region. The Russian army has been surrounded. But thanks to this current operation, Ukrainian soldiers have struck the Russians the ultimate blow. During the final days of the Russian-Ukrainian war, both the Ukrainian and Russian armies focused on the Bakhmut and Sadr districts. Both sides have taken this approach due to the crucial importance of these territories and the fact that they are described as the most important regions of the battle in many ways. When it was discovered that the Russian army's last operational attempt had been deciphered, Ukrainian forces took a move that will drastically change things. This time, Russian forces began to gather in this area. When Ukraine learned that a substantial number of soldiers were being dispatched to Bakhmut and Solit, it took a significant step. The Ukrainian army has dispatched approximately 3,000 soldiers from neighboring location to this region. The men moved in from Solit to Bakhmut were well equipped to form one of the war's most vital lines of resistance when they encountered 3,000 Ukrainians in Bakhmut. Russian forces on their way to attack were unsure what to do following. Then the Ukrainian army took the most vital step. Wagner troops sent to the Bakhmut region were met with a huge surprise because Ukraine had noted the breakthroughs in this region. The Russian army was now facing a major dilemma. Ukraine's challenging implementation strategy went into effect in an instant. The Ukrainian army predicted that the Russians would cross from the Sadr side to Bakhmut, following the mind-boggling move in Solidar. The Wagner Group warriors returned to this region and headed off for Bakhmut. However, the Ukrainian army's vital maneuver entirely blocked Wagner's passage. Don't forget to support us by clicking the super thank you button so that we may continue to provide you the most up-to-date information on the Russian-Ukraine war. Because of the severe issues in Solidar and Bakhmut, the Russian forces chose a different path. This path went through Krasnaya, Gora, and Kurlivka. After establishing superiority in these territories as the invading Russian troops would pass to Bakhmut and Solidar. However, when the Russian army faced an unexpected setback in this region, they were unsure what to do. Ukrainian military had taken several attempts to maintain their domination in the war's most vital regions, Bakhmut and Solidar. However, the Ukrainian army's deployment of Air Force assets in this region had a significant impact on the war's outcome in a variety of ways. The Ukrainian army, which has launched numerous effective counterattacks, has taken the required steps to drive the invaders out of this area. The high casualties, particularly in the Sadr region, enraged Yevgeny Prigozhin. CEO of the Wagner mercenary outfit. Following then, Prigozhin's words startled the entire world. These statements practically announced to the entire world the Ukrainian army's overwhelming dominance. According to Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Ukrainian army is properly structured and working well. These were some of the specific elements that the Russian army lacked. According to Prigozhin, we have a lot to learn from them. These words effectively indicated to the entire world that they were unable to build even a semblance of superiority over Ukraine. Nonetheless, Putin continues to employ the media to keep the public in the dark about these developments because of the significant breakthroughs in Bakhmut. Putin began to produce a lot of propaganda. These propagandas enable them to announce victory in a number of places before engaging in combat with Ukrainian troops. Despite this, Putin is continuously concealing advancements from the public in order to avoid revealing how powerful the Russian army is. Russia wants to give Ukraine a significant psychological advantage right now. If Putin achieves his desired level of psychological supremacy, it is expected that he will be unstoppable in all areas. Although photographs shot in deserted and many civilian neighborhoods give the impression that Ukraine has failed in the fight, the Ukrainian army has been adding success to its victory, particularly recently. The truth continues to manifest in opposition to these images of certainly the West is a driving force behind Ukraine's progress in many sectors because the West backs Ukraine in many areas. It is laying the groundwork for breakthroughs that will encircle Russia's military. This is also the foundation of Ukraine's effective operations in the air and on ground. These are the real reasons Russia can only battle Ukraine on land. The Russian army is being squeezed in numerous areas as a result of the Ukrainian army's backing. As a result of its win on the battlefield and the intimidation it has instilled in Russia, the Ukrainian army is undertaking actions that will change everything. If the current course of events continues, the Ukrainian army will physically corner the Russians. This will provide the groundwork for the Russian pullout from the Ukrainian territory. In 2014, Russia seized the Crimean Peninsula. This is the foundation for establishing vast domination over Ukraine. Despite this, The Russians have had no opportunity of attacking Crimea because the Ukrainian army has placed a considerable number of air defense systems near the shoreline and ports. These actions demonstrated how far the Ukrainian force had advanced in the conflict, particularly psychologically. Major General Andrei Kovalchuk, commander of the Ukrainian Southern Operations Command, gave a statement following the failure of a successful naval attack. According to Kovalchuk, the Black Sea coast is a massive defense line. Furthermore, he stated that after Russia initiated the war, a considerable number of anti-aircraft defenses were deployed in Odessa and the adjacent areas. Indeed, at this moment it is critical that Ukraine has breakthroughs in guarding the areas where the Russians may most readily launch strikes. If these breakthroughs continue, the Ukrainian army will be able to launch further attacks in a variety of places. This will have laid the groundwork for the decisive blow to be delivered to Russia. Apart from the support of Europe and America, which is seen as the most important reason why the Ukrainian army can gain an edge in this region, the embargoes imposed on Russia are also crucial. As a result of this, the Ukrainian army is becoming stronger, while Russia is beginning to lose the fight. In other words, the Ukrainian army benefits from the continuation of the war and the use of time at some areas while continuing to operate against the Russian army. Russian forces are expected to remain uncovered on the battlefield if Ukrainian fighters maintain their advantage. Since the start of the war, Russia has lost around 200,000 men. Furthermore, it is unclear what Putin, who has lost nearly 4,000 tanks, intends to do at this point. Retired Russian commander Igor Girkin's words are designed to reveal the entire world all of the facts regarding the war. Igor Girkin has made numerous pronouncements about Russia's military demise. It expresses how much difficulties the war's continuation has created and served as the foundation for the Russian army's collapse. However, the statements made by war analysts at this time will startle the entire world. According to military strategists, the Ukrainian army will continue to make advances in a variety of regions. This will bolster the Ukrainian army's already established dominance over the Russians. However, there is also the reality that many war observers believe that the Ukrainian army's tank support is the tipping point at which Ukraine should stop the war. The Ukrainian army is now expected to repel the Russian army by marching on it with a big number of tanks. However, if this occurs, Putin's troops will confront a major issue. The loss of the conflict in Ukraine will disrupt the comfort of all bureaucrats who work alongside Putin. This demonstrates how close Russia's power transition is. The fact that Ukrainian forces can trigger this shift in power emphasizes the war's criticality even further. And with that, Putin's obstinacy in Ukraine is exposed once more. There is a lot of stress in relations with China. The European Union's decision to impose an embargo on countries that support Russia has thrown everything into disarray. China has nearly challenged the entire world. China, which wishes to strike a blow at the United States after this embargo decision, has executed a prisoner who is a U.S. citizen. While this judgment has had far-reaching consequences around the world, the structure of the Chinese Communist Party in the United Kingdom has been revealed. The Ukrainian army began to adopt diverse actions in the final days of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Putin became more confrontational as a result of the Ukrainian soldiers who led Russia to back-to-back defeats. After that, Putin promptly established various connections with other countries and emphasized that the Russian army needed urgent aid. Only China responded to this plea for assistance. However, the cost to China would be significant. China began to provide assistance under the terms of the permanent friendship agreement made with Russia prior to Russia's entry into the conflict. These, on the other hand, elicited a strong response from people all across the world. The European Union asked that Russia's aid be withdrawn immediately, claiming that it legitimizes the illegal annexation of Ukraine. In contrast, European Union Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has explicitly said that hefty embargoes will be imposed on those countries sponsored by Russia when China should have retreated, according to the forecast. China challenged the entire world, and Chinese Foreign Minister Gang has warned his country that it will react in the necessary ways. He revealed that China, which has recently been on a roll, is bracing for a major challenge. China, which is furious over the situation, has made a significant step to intimidate a U.S. citizen imprisoned in China has been sentenced to death by China. This sparked outrage around the world. This predicament, which has threatened the United States' global dominance, has once again highlighted the freedom of the expanding Chinese economy, despite the fact that this action opened up a channel of communication between them and the U.S. The U.S., which was attempting to assist Ukraine, was unable to deal with the issue. That's good enough, and it was revealed why China backs. The mystery of how this gift came to be has astonished people all around the world. According to sources in Beijing, China's Foreign Relations Ministry recently visited the Russian Consulate General. Although the specific content of this discussion is unknown, war analysts have guessed the places where negotiations took place. While Russia's primary demand is backing, it is expected that the Russian army, which is more resistant to these supports, will engage the U.S. and China, claims it can easily conquer Taiwan. Following on from this, China's policies confirm this. However, when this move was revealed, both Putin and China faced major challenges. The prolongation of the war by Russia assured that the U.S. could not act significantly in Beijing while Beijing maintains its support. A data was tied to British intelligence. The British Communist Party, one of the British opposition parties, turned out to have secretly contributed a lot of intelligence to the Chinese Communist Party and arranged for it to establish an outpost here. This prepared the path for China to gain instant access to information within the United Kingdom. This police station, which was constructed under the direction of businessman Royce Line, was investigated immediately. This crisis, which is regarded a major threat to the security of the United Kingdom, has demonstrated to the entire world how essential the Ukrainian war is. A thorough investigation into these occurrences has been undertaken in the United Kingdom. However, it has been proven that numerous countries have a network capable of spying on China from anywhere in the world. While the British people were in a state of terror, the US and EU countries constantly stated their support for the UK, and all countries have begun to organize in order to halt the war in Ukraine. The fact that China has grown so dominant has yet to benefit many countries. While Western countries cope with the Ukraine situation, China, which has grown its economic independence as well as its combat power, has taken a prominent position in many areas. According to this, China, like Russia, has been recorded as avoiding the imposition of an embargo by maintaining the US dollar level at a specific point. If things continue as they are, we may see a conflict in Taiwan akin to the one in Ukraine. However, in this conflict, the aid of the European Union and the United States will not be sufficient, and China's ability to be self-sufficient in a variety of areas has become one of the factors attracting attention. However, it is well known that the United States possesses a weapon capable of dealing a devastating blow to China. This weapon will utterly obstruct China's help for the Russian army. The United States has long expected that many Eastern countries will obtain access to the current economic system. Barnaby began to connect China to himself by directing all of his investors there because of the inexpensive labor force. This commitment enabled countries such as Ukraine to obtain independence quickly. However, China has begun to show its teeth by withdrawing from fake economic growth. This was a major issue at a time when tensions were high all throughout the world. Only Russia had the capability to initiate a world war, including the Ukrainian war. The United States, anticipating this, began to intimidate China with its corporations despite China's strong production capacity. The U.S. dismantling its plants in that region could result in a hefty bill being given to China, which has a vast population. Fearing this, China has temporarily halted its intentions, and this has been widely reported in the international news. However, several countries have already taken action because they are concerned about China's involvement in the war. And the subject of the Ukrainian army's future of extremely good days has come up. A noteworthy piece of news recently surfaced on the agenda. The G7 countries, which are regarded as the world's backbone, were convened under a different theme this time. Russia's increasingly unstable and especially ephemeral calls for nuclear war have already mobilized the entire globe. However, as a result of China's direct engagement in the war, the G7 has begun to take significant actions on this subject. The G7 countries, which have made extensive demands for assistance to the Ukrainian army, will help Ukraine to acquire a significantly different level of dominance, particularly economically. Furthermore, in parallel with the reinforcement of Ukrainian troops, massive embargoes would be imposed on the Russian army, which is already going through turbulent times. These decisions, which were widely condemned around the world, demonstrated that the Russian force is on the verge of collapsing. Following these recent developments, which have enabled a severe mental breakdown, the Russian army has begun to surrender one after the other. It was discovered that several factions were preparing to surrender to the Ukrainian army. This decision has once again demonstrated to the world that Putin cannot retain soldiers in Ukraine. And then things got complicated in the Russian army. The Russian army has just begun to face severe difficulties. Many causes, such as a lack of ammunition and equipment from Russia, have emerged as the most significant issues facing Russians. It is possible to argue that the Russian army, which has failed to make even the most minor breakthrough against Ukraine, is now heading towards much worse days. While accepting outside aid was prohibited, incoming aid was also destroyed during Ukrainian army operations. In the midst of these difficulties, it has become clear that they have no chance against the Ukrainian army, even if the Russian army was unable to obtain assistance. It was believed that it possessed ammunition and vehicles. Things were going well for Ukraine until Ukraine took them away by conducting massive operations against them. And the Russian army was now in a position in scenario in which it was unsure what to do against Ukraine. But the most serious issue at this point was that Russia was left to deal with a major political and administrative crisis. If the Russian forces supposedly make it past such difficulties, the first person they want to overthrow is Putin. Putin, realizing this, is anticipated to go through a difficult process. Russia poses a significant threat to England. The Kremlin spokesman has acted to inflict severe embargoes on the United Kingdom. Putin is enraged by the UK's crucial Storm Shadow move. Putin was terrified of losing Crimea after the Ukrainian army performed 2 successful operations with these weapons to combat Storm Shadows. The British have chosen to send S-400s to Crimea. This has perplexed the entire planet. Britain's breakthroughs reached a new level in the last days of the Russian-Ukraine war. England, which has a pivotal position in the conflict through supplying all forms of support in all areas, has taken a very different approach. This time he chose to send Storm Shadow missiles with a range of 250 kilometers to Ukraine. This decision opened the door for Moscow to enter the range, and Putin erupted in rage. A heated exchange was witnessed from Putin's embassy in the United Kingdom when he declared that the British people taxpayers were coerced into fighting in this war. The replies to the Russian consul were immediate. This event has once again demonstrated to the entire world that the British people, like the UK, fully support Ukraine. However, the Council's main comment was that the missiles deployed to Ukraine had played a key role in 2 successful missions. In a burning explosion, Ukraine blew up one of the Russian-occupied buildings. This situation has demonstrated to the entire world how far Ukraine's dominance in this region has spread. But the true breakthrough came when Ukrainian President Zelensky delivered the most devastating blow to Russian forces while continuing his summit tour in London. According to the Daily Express, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky praised the United Kingdom for its assistance at the conclusion of his discussions with Rishi Sunak. He stated that Russia will be struck a significant blow. The Ukrainian army activated Storm Shadows immediately after this declaration. Additionally, 2 Russian fighter jets and 2 military helicopters were shot down. Putin, enraged, summoned the Kremlin spokesman and reminded him of the pledge made to Boris. "We will destroy Britain with a single missile because of Storm Shadows." Putin knew that Ukraine could succeed any place it wanted, and he made the crucial choice from the start of the war. Putin was aware that Ukraine was concerned about Crimea. It was just a matter of time before Zelensky, who had sacrificed everything to gain authority in this region, used Storm Shadows to attack the Russian military headquarters in Crimea. Realizing this, Putin moved quickly to deploy the S-400s to Crimea. This action effectively ended Putin's control in the Black Sea. When British intelligence alerted Ukraine of this knowledge, Putin embarked on a perilous path. When Putin was considering where to deliver the S-400s to Crimea, he reasoned that land resupply would not be secure enough following Ukraine's successful attack on the Kerch Bridge. As a result, he decided to transfer S-400s from the sea to Crimea. Russia was expected to totally block the entrance to Ukraine, coupled with strict security measures. When the Ukrainian army learned of the covert supply, it moved quickly to intercept the Russian ships as they entered the port of Sevastopol, and he made his preparations in the area as if the S-400s were on the move. Another key weapon taken from the UK was triggered at this moment, and the Russian troops were taken by surprise. The signal-jamming submarines deployed by the UK went into action at this moment. The Russian ships began to gather below the coordinates for the operation in order to ensure a smooth operation. The Ukrainian army also brought armed unmanned aerial vehicles to a nearby airport, and British intelligence alerted the Ukrainian army that the Russian fleet was approaching the area. That is sufficient to begin this process. The flag officers in the area have taken off and are heading in the direction of the coordinates. The Ukrainian unmanned aerial drones and the Russian fleet collided just in time for the computations to begin because the Russian Navy was carrying S-400s. He was confident that the bombings would block them all. However, signal jammers discovered on Britain's submarine changed everything. The S-400s, which were supposed to shoot at Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles, began to miss their aim. Armed unmanned aerial vehicles, which can easily avoid missiles flying to the right and left, have radically changed the game. The Russian Navy soldiers were taken aback by these developments. The S-400s had become a tremendous embarrassment. Unmanned aerial aircraft UAV from Ukraine began shelling. However, since the ships, which were heavily protected, could not be sufficiently destroyed, the British Storm Shadow missile system became crucial for this mission as well. Storm Shadows, which were stationed near Odessa, were shot back at the coordinates of these ships. The Russian fleets had dropped anchor in order for the S-400s to function properly. Things swung dramatically in Ukraine's advantage as a result of the Ukrainian army firing missiles back-to-back. A point shot was fired from Odessa against the Russian ships. 3 ships were lost at sea, along with 3 S-400s. Unmanned aerial vehicles that successfully completed the mission were greeted at the airport following the achievements of the Ukrainian soldiers. Huge celebrations took place in Odessa when Russian soldiers saw that the ships carrying the S-400s had not arrived in Sevastopol. They became concerned. The Russian military, who realized there was a major problem with the adjacent explosions, promptly notified the Kremlin. Putin erupted in rage after learning that the S-400s had been detonated. It has once again drawn a caution to the UK, which delivered Storm Shadows, which is regarded as the primary figure of this operation, which demonstrates Juldisak the Russian military and air defense systems. However, this time the warning was not merely verbal. He dispatched his warships and a huge body of men to the Baltics in order to be near to England. Many countries who support the Ukrainian army have been intimidated as a result of this development. However, the response to this step was not delayed before England. A major danger came from Finland, one of the region's most powerful countries. This is what gave both Russian forces and Putin shivers. According to the chief of the Finnish General Staff, Russia is playing with fire in this region. He warned that if the current trend continues, Russia should brace itself for a major war with such a threatening response, even from the Baltics. It was just a matter of time until Putin ran into bigger problems. While Russia is finding it increasingly difficult to breathe in these areas, the statements made by war analysts regarding the developments here have reverberated throughout the world. According to military observers, the Ukrainian army progressively gained success. The fundamental reason for this was that many Western countries supported it in every way. Russian forces are discouraged against Ukraine as a result of these big setbacks, but they are still fighting on the front lines. Aware of this, Putin has stated in recent speeches that Russia's fate is dependent on the outcome of the Ukrainian conflict. If such problems persist, Ukraine is expected to conclude the conflict in a relatively short period. But at this point, Russia is bracing for not only a major setback, but also a major political catastrophe. If things continue as they are, the Ukrainian army will achieve its greatest victory in history. And for the first time in Russian history, the probability of early elections will grow. Vladimir Putin has ruled Russia for over 30 years. The Russian people's frustration with the persistence of harsh regimes throughout this administration, time is being revealed in Russia. Criticizing the government is strictly prohibited. When such problems were compounded by defeats against Ukraine, a significant shift began to occur in Russia. While several names associated with Putin's alternatives have gained popularity in Russia, it is clear that Putin has disregarded a vast number of people in response because it has also killed all types of bureaucrats and commanders who would jeopardize their own power. A breakthrough such as a coup is unlikely to come from Russian soldiers. The dismissal of a huge number of soldiers who fought against the Ukrainian army one by one compounded matters. This has been described as the cost of being impotent in the face of Ukraine, and it became clear that the Russian army's defeat in such a short period of time would result in Putin's resignation.